Welcome back to another explainer. Today, we are unpacking a fascinating and, honestly, deeply dark piece of folklore that explores the absolute extremes of human ambition. We're diving into the legend of the Kapalia Ahori. Now, this isn't just your standard ghost story. It's really a masterclass on the mechanics of greed. It's a narrative that subtly warns us that those who actively seek out the skull will eventually become the skull themselves. So think about this. To what extent would a human go to become rich? I mean, really, truly rich. This question is the anchor for everything we're about to discuss. In this story, we follow a man named Manoj, and his ambition isn't just to be comfortable, it's completely blinding. He wants the biggest house, the most successful business, and he wants to be the absolute wealthiest man in his entire village. And, as we're going to see, he is willing to cross literally every conceivable moral and physical boundary to make that happen. All right, let's jump straight into part one, the hidden wealth and the ambition. To set the scene, you have to remember that before modern banking, people with immense ancestral fortunes really only had one way to protect it from thieves, and that was to bury it in the ground. They'd hide their wealth in secret locations in the dead of night, essentially turning the entire landscape into this massive hidden treasure hunt, just waiting for someone desperate enough to find the map. Well, to find his map, Manoj approaches a dark mystic, an Aghori Baba, who introduces him to something called Kapal Sadhana. This is a terrifying, extreme tantric ritual where the practitioner uses a human skull to bridge the gap between the living and the dead. If you actually manage to pull it off, the skull grants its master absolute power, immense wealth, and supernatural knowledge, like the ability to see directly into the past and the future. But there is a massive catch. The very first ingredient you need is a human head. And that requirement leads to Manoj's very first brutal act. One night, while creeping through the village, he overhears two brothers, Mahesh and Suresh, arguing. Their elderly father, Raghuvir, is deathly ill, and these guys are terrified he's going to pass away before telling them where the family's wealth is buried. Manoj doesn't even hesitate. Seizing the opportunity, he sneaks right into the old man's room, murders him in his sleep, and severs his head to use for the ritual. Just like that, he has his prize, and his descent into darkness officially begins. Which brings us to part two, the rules of Kapal Savana. You see, this dark magic isn't just chaotic sorcery. It operates a lot more like a strict cursed recipe, where any deviation at all means failure or much worse. Let's look at the actual grisly preparation involved here. Step 1 is turning that severed head into a skull by burning it in a fire pit. Step 2 requires some very specific grim ingredients. Manoj has to venture out and gather ashes directly from a burning funeral pyre, followed by soil from a cemetery guarded by aggressive howling dogs. Once he coats the skull in those elements, he moves to step 3. He must bury the skull in a pit, sit above it on an animal skin, and begin a relentless, unbroken chant. This kicks off what's known as the 21 Nights of Torment, and it really brilliantly illustrates just how deep Manoj's greed actually runs. For 21 consecutive nights, the guy is physically and psychologically tortured. He's hearing horrific screams and manic laughter echoing in the dark around him. He comes down with a severe burning fever, and by the final nights, he is literally being attacked by giant, blood-sucking mosquitoes that are physically draining him. Yet through all of this horrifying supernatural resistance, Manoj never breaks his chant. He absolutely refuses to leave his spot. His desire for wealth overrides every single survival instinct he possesses. And that brings us to part 3, the reign of the Kapali Aghori. So, on the dawn of the 22nd day, the torment finally ends. Manoj digs up the skull, and its eyes glow this piercing red as the magic takes hold and it declares its servitude to him. Manoj is now officially the Kapali Aghori, and his very first command? He demands to know exactly where old man Raghuvir hid his fortune. Because the skull retains all the knowledge of the deceased, it immediately gives Manoj the exact coordinates. It tells him the treasure is buried under a specific banyan tree, 50 kos away. Manoj and his wife Maltese rush out to the site, dig into the earth, and unearth this massive copper pot just overflowing with gold and silver jewelry. Instantly, their lives are transformed. Manoj buys a massive estate, becomes the owner of 2 wood factories, and achieves the exact level of material wealth he so desperately craved. But, there's always a catch with these things. The crucial point here is that this power is not a free gift. It's a heavy, inescapable contract. Every single night, from 8 p.m. until 2 a.m., Manoj goes through a physical transformation where his skin literally turns blue. He's forced to travel to a remote cave, sit on his throne as the supreme Kapali Aghori, and hold court. He is entirely obligated to use the skull's dark magic to solve the petty, vindictive problems of absolutely anyone who pays him. To give you an idea of the kind of terrifying work he's doing during these nightly shifts, consider the story of a client named Randir. Randir pays Manoj 500 rupees to punish his greedy daughter-in-law Nandini because she kicked him out of his home. From his cave, Manoj uses the skull to set a trap. Nandini finds what looks like a lucky gold coin near a well. But the second she picks it up, the coin turns pitch black, transforms into a bat that attacks her face, and then, if that wasn't enough, a horrific skeleton emerges from the well and drags her down into the darkness. This is the daily, gruesome reality of the power Manoj now wields. Let's fast forward a bit to part 4. The cycle continues. Jumping forward 2 decades, the initial high of all that unlimited wealth has completely faded, and we start to see the true, crushing physical and emotional cost of Manoj's dark bargain. By year 10, his partner in all of this, his wife Malti, dies of a severe illness. By year 20, Manoj is chronologically only 50 years old, but the dark magic has so completely ravaged his body that he looks and feels like an incredibly frail 70-year-old man. Those nightly trips to the cave become pure agony. He is weak, he's exhausted, and he desperately wants to stop, but the rules of the Kapal Sadhana strictly forbid him from quitting. Meanwhile, his own sons, Mohit and Lakshman, are completely unaware of their father's cursed history or his nightly blue-skinned transformations. Manoj has handed the wood factories over to them, but rather than being grateful, they're suspicious. They notice his secretiveness and assume that if he gave away the actual businesses so easily, he must be hoarding an even larger, secret ancestral fortune all to himself. And here is exactly where the infection of greed spreads. As the sons are discussing their suspicions at the factory, they happen to be overheard by a disgruntled worker named Sunil. Listen to Sunil's thought process here. The old man has some great hidden wealth that he doesn't want to give to his greedy children. I wish I could get it. The seed is planted. Sunil decides he is going to completely bypass the sons and take this imagined treasure for himself. This is where the undeniable, chilling symmetry of the folklore really reveals itself. It's like a snake eating its own tail. 20 years ago, a young Manoj snuck into a house and beheaded a sleeping old man to steal his wealth. Now, 20 years later, on a night when Manoj is simply too sick and weak to make it to his cave, Sunil sneaks into Manoj's house. Armed with a knife, Sunil beheads the sleeping, elderly Manoj, hoping to uncover his wealth. As Sunil escapes through the window holding Manoj's severed head, he is completely oblivious to the dark curse he has just inherited. And he utters his final, triumphant words, "Now no one can stop me from being rich." Those are the exact sentiments, the exact blinding ambition that Manoj felt 20 years prior. The new curse cycle is officially sealed. Which brings us to our final thought for this explainer. History repeats itself, but when the ultimate price of wealth is your own head, who truly holds the power? Is it the man who wields the magic, or is it the magic that inevitably consumes the man? This folklore elegantly demonstrates that dark wealth demands a continuous sacrifice. The magic requires a skull, and if you are the one holding it, it's really only a matter of time before that skull is yours. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive. Take this lesson with you, and I'll see you in the next explainer.